Kia ora and welcome to the Aotearoa Rugby Pod. We've got some big news coming straight into the record today. Sam Cane stepping down as All Blacks captain, leaving his NZ contract early at the end of 2024 and going to a 3-year stint in Japan. So plenty to unpack there. In the same week that there are reports, not just reports, NZR's admitted they're trying to get Richie Mo'unga home early from Japan. So lots going on in the player contract market at the moment with two big stars of the game and key All Blacks over the last few years. Now, we've also, of course, got the Blues. Jipper's going to be very happy to talk about that soon. Top of the table, getting that big win right at the end there. It was 50-50, wasn't it? It was touch and go, but they got there. They are now on top, and you could say possibly favourites to be the top qualifier for the Super Rugby playoffs. So plenty to get into there. Of course, we'll have your emails and we'll have your comments from the YouTube comment section, and some of them were spicy this week, to say the least. So we'll have the tipping comp as well to finish off. So before we carry on any further, next to me, James Parsons, looking like a very happy man after a very good day in front of 26,000 people at Eden Park.
I aged a bit in that last 5 minutes, I'm not going to lie to you. But I think that's the most impressive thing about the Blues this season. When the game's been on the line late, they've won. And that's probably not something we've come accustomed to, especially in my time there. When that big moment presented itself, we weren't able to take it. So, and also I thought Harry Plummer has just gone from strength to strength, and his kicking was the difference, 100%. Had he not been that accurate, I think the Hurricanes probably did enough to win it, but the Blues' desperate goal line defence, 2 try-saving tackles in the first half, and then obviously Offa's big hit and Sam not ripping it away. Those 3 moments were a deciding factor in that game.
Very gutsy. A man who survived a big week himself over in Japan is Bryn Hall, coming off the back of the end of the season. Looking fresh though, relatively fresh.
I had to do a lot to look like this, Ross. So I went to the sauna this morning just to get a few toxins out of me, and bit of face moisturiser, mate, to look in a good, somewhat good position. So now, look, excited to be back, lads. Watched the show last week. Jip, thought your analysing work was awesome. So look forward to seeing hopefully a bit more through the next couple of shows. But yeah, look forward to talking about the Blues with a great performance against the Hurricanes and the Crusaders and the Highlanders, getting their first win over the New Zealand team in 19 games.
We will get there in just a moment, but let's start with Sam Cane. Chip, you've spent a fair bit of Sam Cane. You know the man pretty well. He obviously has had a 95 Test career. He is a very, very good All Black, 27 games as captain, so an outstanding All Black to be All Black captain for that long. He's decided to step away. He's been there and has decided to put his family first, another child on the go. What do you think about the decision?
Well, I think he's really enjoyed his time up in Japan, which probably opened up his mind to something like this. And then when Suntory come with a 3-year offer at his point of his career, you do probably have to take stock. And the way he plays the game, his body has been through the ringer. Don't forget that neck injury. And he's not going to be able to change the way he plays. So at international level, how many more years can he do that? Or, can he secure at least a lengthy stint of 3 years up until he's 35? I don't think there's any red herrings here. Like a lot of people read into it, he's had a shoulder tap or whatever. He's definitely coming back to contribute at Test match level this season. Hopefully he can remain fit and get those 100 Test caps because he deserves it. But this is definitely an offer was put in front of him he just couldn't say no to.
Razor was up here, and whether that was a conversation, I'm not too sure. But I think, from all accounts, the way that he plays, and I guess, can you give another 4 years to get to that World Cup at his age? That's probably something that he had to ponder and talk with his wife, and obviously has a kid on the way as well, and having a really, internally think about what that's going to be the best for him and his family. And I think getting a 3-year deal over here in Suntory is a great deal for him. I think with having the experience being here, it's a great form of rugby. You get a lot of time off, 4 to 5 months off if you are a foreigner. And I think, longevity-wise, to set up your family, it's a pretty good decision. And I think from all accounts, I think both parties will be happy with that decision that's been made.
I think on that, I do think all parties will be happy, because purely you're going to get a version of Sam Cane who's coming back with purpose to try and reach a personal milestone, but also go out on a high. So you've got a motivated player that has still got the ability to play in international rugby. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. But then it's also nice that they've got this year buffer to transition. You're not having to rush anyone into that position. They can sort of get their feet under the table as a new coaching group and still have the services of him in and around the environment, and more than likely, if he's fit and available, will probably play.
When I think of Sam Cane, I think of a guy from a journalist point of view who was very, very good. You could talk to him about complex issues. He could break them down very simply so you could understand what was going on in the game. In fact, he was almost the go-to guy on a Sunday morning after you'd been at a test match. You wanted him at the table to ask the questions because it wasn't cliches, it wasn't nonsense. He would give you a straight answer, but do it in a way that you could really understand and that the public can understand. That kind of knowledge, to me, from my experience, I could imagine could be very useful within that camp.
Oh, he's got the changer in, there's no doubt about it. The way he sort of galvanised that group through probably the most challenging period of All Black history for a long time, you know, for what they went through after losing to Ireland here at home, and you know, and the way they came back in the World Cup, and make no mistake, he was right at the centre of that, along with other leaders, but he was the man that had to front the media and really put his neck out there, and he did that. He had his teams back, not only the players but coaching staff, and I think that is always a true measure of someone's character under pressure. What do they do? And you know, he definitely stood behind people that were under pressure, and I just think that sort of IP will be important this year, as I say, that transitioning over. So I just still think he's got a massive role to play in this test match side this year.
But when you talk about transitioning, and you do have Ardie Savea available, you do have Dalton Papali'i, you've got a number of players who could fit into that position in the long term. How much do you really want to use Sam Cane from a strategic point of view on the field, considering you're in a new World Cup cycle?
Yeah, I suppose it depends on, those guys will get probably more of an opportunity now that this decision's been made, but they've still got to win test matches. And Sam Cane, in terms of the balance of the loose forward trio, which has been there for the last 3 years, he's made the bulk of the tackles as loose forwards. So take him out of there, we've just got to make sure that balance is right, that someone's still doing that role, so that guys like in the past, that Shannon Frizzell and Ardie Savea can do what they're great at. Sam's unique talent is tackling and breakdown, and he's done it so well that's allowed them to sort of free up and do what they do well. So that balance and not feeling the need to rush that, I think, is crucial.
I think with knowing Ray's and that coach group leadership is really important within the group. And so, you know, when you've got a guy that's been a captain for 27 odd test matches, has been there and played 95 test matches, you want that experience in your squad. And especially with new coaches and wanting to win test matches, the more IP that you have in there with leadership qualities, it's going to be great for the environment. And someone that knows the All Black environment and what it means to be an All Black, I think you can't underestimate how important that will be, even if it is for this year, how important that will be for that group, and especially if there's young loose forwards that are selected through that new team, having a guy like Sam Cane to help those guys through off the field during the week and understand what it takes to be an All Black, I think will be very important for this year.
It is an interesting period that we'll be in. I mean, if we're going into an All Black squad, let's say, has Ardie Savea and Sam Cane in it, although Sam hasn't had a lot of game time this year up in Japan, when you look at that and you go, okay, well, we're used to selecting on format in New Zealand. We're not used to selecting the majority of guys in a position out of Japan. You know, we know what Dalton Papali'i looks like. If you're Scott Robertson and you're looking at those two guys in particular, how do you go about explaining your selection or go about making your selection considering the work that people are doing back home?
It's a good question, but at the end of the day, it's not a development team. The best players need to be picked. The All Blacks are expected to win. So whoever you have available, you've got to pick the best squad, especially with the new coaching group. Like, people will be, you know, with Razor's history, they'll be expecting a clean sheet this season. So, and also I think players understand that. Like, Ardie Savea is the best player in the world. He is going to be picked. Like, that's fact. Sam Cane's done it for a number of times, and when fit and available, he has played a serious role that probably goes unrecognised to the naked eye. So if he doesn't, then someone else has to do that. And what player fits the bill, I think, you know, probably most like for like is an Ethan Blackadder, potentially at a 7, because he's plays similar, or they change up the balance of that loose forward trio and allow a Dalton Papali'i or a Peter Lakai or so forth to play their game.
But this area is becoming a little grey, Bryn. The All Blacks have now, New Zealand Rugby has admitted they're chasing Richie Mo'unga to get him out of his contract over in Japan, bring him home early. The relationship between where you are and whether you're an All Black and the role that you play and how important you are to that team, it appears there's been a serious shift in understanding what that is going to mean to New Zealand rugby in the long term?
You know, a big part of that is Razor in and himself, right? When he was first selected, he talked around being open-minded around what the overseas criteria might mean. And, you know, it's probably been something that hasn't been done previously with previous coaches. But I think with Razor, knowing him and his open-mindedness and wanting to be one step ahead, I think it's having conversations to be able to open the door for that. And I think with Richie, how important he was at the Crusaders, and, you know, there's no... I think people know that there is a good relationship between those two, and I guess with how much trust he does have with Richie. So I think, you know, I think he knows how important he would be if he was in that All Blacks environment, and probably knowing that, you know, he's in the career best form of his life. He's probably got 3 to 4 more years, I think, of being able to go to a next World Cup and be real dominant at world rugby. So I just think with Razor and the open-mindedness that he has had, and you can see with the article that has come out that they have obviously approached him to try and get him back home. Now, I'm not too sure what that's going to look like. That's going to have to probably be playing out in the next couple of months or even to a year. I'm not too sure, but I think what Razor has done, and he's openly said it, he wants to be a step ahead, and having those conversations with like a Richie Mo'unga or Adi Severe, and being able to play in Japan and having loopholes around how players can do that. I think this is probably the new age of something that's going to be pretty familiar, but I think New Zealand players moving forward.
I don't see it as grey, to be honest. So if you look at it, an Adi and a Sam, that's part of their sabbatical deal. Yeah. So just like Cody Taylor went away, he didn't play rugby, but he went away, and the expectation in their deal is they can come back and be selected. Yes, he's come back early to help the Crusaders and he wants some run of the ball. That's his decision. So there's no surprise here. And if you look at history under the sabbatical category, if you use TJ Perenara or Patrick Tuipulotu as an example, they ended their Super Rugby contract on their own terms, sought the Japanese deal, and then came back and got signed on a Super Rugby contract. They all were expected to go back through NPC to be eligible for selection in the All Blacks. Only in the current framework, the only way that would change if there were multiple injuries in a certain position and the board signed off a player that hadn't played NPC yet being eligible for selection. So it is pretty clear. So you either get the sabbatical because you've earned the right, or you manufacture one on your own terms, but that comes with a lot stricter process to get back and available for selection. Damian McKenzie the same.
In the case of Richie, he left and they're trying to get him back.
Yeah.
It's quite a different scenario, isn't it?
So it is, but if we're looking about, you know, using the word grey, it's not. It's not grey.
Okay.
It's very black and white, and it's not going to be easy. You know, potentially the only way it is terminating and re-signing with both parties, however that may look, because the current deal will be clear. That he's up there for 3 years, I believe. So Razor's got an open mind, and I think we have to. I think we're naive to think there's not going to be changes in this, but the current framework does allow for certain things like this to work, but it just needs to be well thought out and being able to be well articulated, because the public will have an expectation that they want players, you know, based in New Zealand and picked, unless they're in that special sabbatical category. And to meet that sabbatical category, you have to be Sam Cane, Adi Savea, or the likes of Richie. There's no way you're ever going to match the money he's on, but it's how you can maybe make it work for all parties. Like Toshiba, they're not just going to let him go. He's the best 10 going around. I better be careful there. Best 10 in our definitely. I just don't need any South African abuse this week, thanks. He would always, if you're a starting All Black 10, you're always going to command a fair chunk of change. But he's got some things he wants to achieve outside of the All Black environment, so it has to work for him, has to work for Toshiba, it has to work for New Zealand Rugby. It has to be a win-win-win, is probably what I'm trying to say, because it's not going to be able to work on a win-win for Richie in New Zealand and a loss for Toshiba. You know, it's got to work for everyone.
Bryn, do we need him back here, considering the fact that, you know, what Jipper said, there are first fives here, there are people to fill the black jersey. Does Richie Mo'unga, is he that needed?
Look, it's tough to say, because I think, you know, probably the strength of, you know, our country is that when guys have gone, there's been players, Damian McKenzie, Stephen Perifeta, Harry Plummer, Brett Cameron, you know, these names that you're running off, yes, they're not experienced with some of them, but, you know, we know that when they're given in the All Black environment, opportunity, how they're coached, we end up being okay in that space. I think for the reason why I think we do need Richie back is that, look, I've been watching him in Japan, and I know it's a little bit of different competition, but, man, he's easily the best player over here. Like the influence that he has, we've seen it at the Crusaders, probably sort of at the back end of that All Black tenure when he was there. We're starting to see probably the best version of Richie, but look, I think anytime you can have his experience, and you can't underestimate the connection that he has with Razor, and in terms of what he brings out of him. And I think, with the Crusaders, and I know it's not at the international level, but the things that he put in place for him to give the confidence to be that kind of player, you'd have to think that it would transition into the international stage. I guess with the experience of Test match that Richie has actually played, you'd have to think he'd go to another level. So I think we would need him back, but at the same time, if he doesn't come back, I think we're well accustomed to having the depth in terms of the players that are playing really well right now. You've got Bowden Barrett, who's committed long term as well. So just me personally, I think we do need him back because of the way that he is playing. So it's always good to have that kind of IP and that kind of player coming back to the country.
A man of his skills, of course we want him here, want him available for selection. I think there's another factor to consider, and it's like the old adage of Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. There's a relationship, there's a synergy between him and Razor that brings the best out of both parties. So there's, it's not just Richie's desire to get back. I think, this coaching group, in particular, Razor, have a track record with this quarterback, so to speak, and that's how he's always worded it. He's always said Richie's his quarterback, and he's created systems and processes around him which have been successful. So from his point of view, getting him back he is highly motivated, and that's not a slight on the current form of any other 10, but it's a relationships, business as such, coaching and man managing and people managing and understanding each other and feeding off each other. So that would give them a lot of confidence as well.
And I imagine the Crusaders wouldn't mind being party to the agreement with the way things are right now.
Yeah, and I suppose, well, I'll ask you, would there be this much focus on it had the Crusaders been top of the table?
I think because it's the All Blacks, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would, because he's an All Black first and foremost to majority of the people in the country, right? Above that, but he's an All Black because he was so successful at the Crusaders. So I suppose that is a massive part of it. But it's also a big story because, to me, Brendan, I'd be interested to hear this from you. This seems like a maturation of the way that we approach rugby in New Zealand. If you follow any other sport in the world, if you head into a transfer window, you go and buy a player. You can buy a player from somebody else. You pay a premium, but you buy a player from somebody else. It's just not something that New Zealand rugby has entered into in that way, and being in that global market where you can just buy someone mid-season, break contracts, come up with these kind of deals. Do you think that this is sort of a sign of the way that we might end up like other professional sports around the world?
Well, I think it's opening the conversation because, in fact, I think if you look at the international level, we're not world leading. Do you know what I mean? We haven't been world leading in probably the last, couple of years. Ireland, we've talked about South Africa, well, they've gone back-to-back World Cups. And so, and they have different criteria, not Ireland, but more so South Africa, obviously, with having been able to select people from other international tournaments. But I think that's the reason why for so long we were world leading. We were able to obviously stay ahead of the curve, which we aren't at this stage. And then so I think it's been able to now open up conversations, which we're talking about now with Richie, the sabbatical talk that we've had. We've even talked about Super Rugby Pacific with around the South Africans leaving and then probably not being, bar this year, a competitive product. So I think we are changing in that front. I think just due to the fact that we aren't the number one team in the world and we haven't had that same success rate that we probably have had for the last 20 years.
If you look at other professional sport, it's run by a billionaire that has a bottomless pit. New Zealand rugby doesn't have a bottomless pit to just buy people out of contracts and so forth. So you have to get creative, which they've done really well over a long period of time around the sabbaticals, obviously starting back with Dan Carter. What that looks like in 5-10 years, I don't know, but I think we all know that it won't look the same. There's going to become different pressures in how that looks. And I think off the back of South Africa's success of winning 2 World Cups and selecting players from overseas competitions, and they still garner a high demand for their product back home when those players aren't playing. Would it be the same here? I'm not sure.
Is it doable? I mean, you're in the inside.
It's complex.
What goes on?
It's very complex. And I stress again, I just think everyone's got to have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Broadcasters included. Everyone's got to, we can't surprise anyone because there's a lot of, I just think there's a lot of history at stake. But also I'll say again, I know it's not going to stay that way forever. It's just not realistic to think that way.
Yeah, which is a good segue to the next part of this. Last week we were talking quite a lot about rule changes and the evolution of rugby and how it's constantly changing. We copped a bit of heat from people who think we want to change the rules to make everything work for New Zealand. You know, of course we do. Yeah. This is a New Zealand program. But one of the things that we really want to do is actually be quite practical and make it better. So despite the heat, look, we like to hear it. We like the debate, and we'll get a little bit into this very soon about the fact that World Rugby in the last week completely by chance amended some of the rules that we talked about. And, you know, not the bench stuff, but the other stuff to do with free kicks and the scrum that the Springboks took. So we'll get a little bit into that in a little while. But first, let's go and talk a bit about the Blues and the Hurricanes. Let's talk some actual rugby. The Blues, Chipper, they win it.
Yeah.
It was a very good win. You've talked a little bit about it at the start of the show. What do you think was the key difference for them coming down the home track against the Hurricanes?
Look, I've said it all season. Their defence is something else. You know, Craig McGrath is probably pretty modest, but he's putting together a system and he's built relationships with these players over 2 to 3 years that is allowing them to execute under pressure. And it wasn't just the last, they stopped a lot of tries in that first half as well, the Blues, through desperate defence. And going into that game, and this just gives you the gravity of their defence, and I think this stat was quite actually eye-opening for me when Woody sent it through to me, who's our statistician. It was five entries for 1 try for the Blues. So opposition would get into their 22, 4 times be denied, 1 time get over. The next best was the Hurricanes, that 2 times in the 22, 1 try. That's a big difference. Like, that's second place. The Hurricanes have got a good D, and that's both sides showed that on the weekend. But it is so hard to score points. You know, you get into that 22 and you expect to be able to get over the line, you know, probably 3 times, at least 50%. And teams haven't been able to do that. And it was again on the weekend when the game was on the line, that hit offer put on, and then the nous and understanding of the rules from Sam Knock, we've just seen it time and time again. We've also seen it on attack against the Reds. Game on the line. Their ability to deliver under pressure when the game is right there for the taking, they've taken it, which is a massive growth for this group, and something that the coaching group is just instilling a sense of confidence and belief that they're just never out of these games.
The biggest thing for me that I found in that game was that, you know, the defensive work that we've talked around with the Blues with Sam Knock, and obviously making that play was massive, but, you know, what did they have? They had 100 tackles and they missed 11. So, you know, that's like 89, 90%, and that's collectively where they've been at the whole year, sometimes even better, right? But I think in the last 10 minutes, I thought this was pretty massive for me, and I think their forward pack has been huge this year. Look, you look at Angus Ta'avale's try, that's been the DNA that's been happening throughout the most of the year. Mark Tellier's try, it was a line out more, and, you know, even Ricky Riccatelli and Bryce Heem's first try, you know, the forwards and what they're able to do in those moments has been pretty consistent through the whole year. But when it was tight, they went to a line out more. They got a penalty from that, which, you know, I've been in experienced teams where in those kind of tight situations, you go to your line out more, you're able to gain penalty and then being able to go into the 22 with an easy outcome like that. You know, then Harry Plummer gets a penalty within the 75th minute to take it out to 4. And so when you have that confidence to be able to be up by 4 points, knowing that defense that you have, what we saw on the weekend, you know, in the 78th minute, they go to the line-out corner through a penalty, and the Hurricanes have the chance to win the game. 11 phases defended. They do a quick tap, and then Sam Knock rips the ball out. So when the game was on the line in that last 10 minutes, their forwards came to the party, which they've done the whole year through the set piece, which is really important in finals footy, and then their defence and ability being able to have the confidence and I guess the trust in that defence. It doesn't matter how many phases the Hurricanes are going to do, whatever they were going to give to them throughout the season, their defence has won them. And that's, Jipper talks about it and myself talk about it a lot. Defence wins championships, and Craig McGrath and what they're doing, they've got the ability to be able to do that. So, yeah, a very, very good game. I thought both games were unreal. I think it's not going to be the last time. I don't think that these two teams they're going to come together. I know there's some games that have to be played before that, but I think, you know, having a home final again, I think if the Blues do get there, they'll be a tough team to defeat with their defence and their forwards, what they've done this year consistently.
Yeah, I think their biggest frustration will be the penalties they gave away in that last 5 minutes to allow the Hurricanes the entry into the 22. Like, fantastic they held them out, but I'm sure the coaching group will look back when they're 60 metres away from their goal line and, you know, understanding where the game's at and the Hurricanes are chasing the game, taking that half a step or just not pushing it at the breakdown, will be a big lesson for them, because that was the best attack, but they didn't have a player that's been rock solid for them at tight head. Lomax, they didn't, they obviously had a late pull-out of Proctor. These are key guys that, put them back in the mixer. The Hurricanes are a different team. Not saying Sullivan or Tossi played poorly, they didn't, but they've got so used to those guys' voices, they got so used to those guys doing certain things in games that has allowed their attack structure to flourish, especially when they go into the 22. So it's not crowing from the rooftops, I don't think. The Hurricanes were in a position, and if you look at it throughout the game, potentially probably should have won. But as I said, Harry Plummer, his kicks, I feel, were the difference.
It was an interesting decision for them to take that final penalty, and maybe it is another indication of how confident they are in their defence, because my first thought when they were up that end was stay there. Stay there. If you get 5 points and you end up back in your own half, great. But stay there, because the last thing you want after seeing TJ snipe and, the Hurricanes go to work in their 22 is to give them another opportunity like that. But they took the kick and then they backed themselves.
But they backed themselves, and it just were 2 penalties given away at the other end of the field they just didn't need to give away. And that's what I mean. It's great. They won the game, they're top of the table, and they've got plenty they can take out of it. But I also think the Hurricanes can be extremely proud of their effort for how disruptive their 23 was. No one knew who was playing. We were doing the pre-show and names were just changing left, right and centre. Delaney was in, he was out, Proctor's out, Lomax is out. It was man, there's a hell of a lot of disruption, and they, played really, really well. And it was a fair reflection of a top-of-the-table clash. But at no point I don't think any of these teams could say we're favourites. I just feel like I still think the Chiefs are right there. I think it is a 3-horse race a little bit. I know the Brumbies are there. I'm just not sold on them still yet, but I do think the Chiefs are still sniffing about. It's not as clear as you think.
I've got the director, Andrew, in my ear saying, what about the Brumbies? And it's a fair point, because when you look at the Brumbies, they've got the Crusaders, the Rebels, and the Force to go. They could easily pick up 15 points there. And what about the Brumbies? Well, the Brumbies, if that's the case, could be hosting a semi-final against the Hurricanes in Canberra, and then they have to try to end that streak. It is quite a position to be in. Do you see that as an option? And if so, do you think that the Canes have learned enough from their trip to Canberra and their trip to Eden Park to be in a position to be there if they have to go away?
Yes, I do. And I know it's hard to probably say if the Brumbies do end up finishing in that position where Hurricanes have to go to Canberra, with the fact that they haven't been able to win there. But I just think you'd have to think that the learnings that they would have had from that Brumbies game throughout that week, the experience of playing in a big, kind of test match kind of footy feel in that game, it's only going to set them up. And I guess with the likes of a Lomax and Delaney and obviously Proctor, 3 guys that have been pretty big in and around for that Hurricanes group to still be in a position to beat the Blues, they'll take a lot of confidence out of it. And I think, you look at the turnover rate, they had 11, sorry, just bringing my notes back up. I think they had 12 turnovers to the 5 Blues, and, you probably can't fault them in that area when they have those kind of late changes, probably adding towards that. But I think, look, with the way that they do play, the competitiveness with what I saw with them going into that last 10 minutes, I think if they do get another chance in Canberra, if they have to go there, I think they can still get the job done. Because, again, I'm not sold on the Brumbies. I know they have the ability to do that, and they have shown that against some pretty good teams that they've been able to get the job done. Are they consistent enough to do that in Canberra when it comes to that time? Time will tell. But it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, knowing that the Australian teams have derbies with their own countries and their own teams in that part of the land, and whereas the New Zealand teams are going to have to end up playing a couple of New Zealand teams like the Blues have a bit of a gauntlet they've got ahead as well.
If you have to go to Canberra again on the weekend, they are very efficient. If you let them in the 22, 4 tries from 6 entries. The Tars tackled at 93%, but they got dominated physically. They just go straight through you. They only did 5 offloads. Discipline will be key to beat the Brumbies in Canberra, because once they get in that 22, more often than not they score points, even when you're tackling at 93%. but they tackled at 83%, and that, as I pointed out a few weeks ago, they're quite cynical. Their penalties were only 9, so they've actually did make an adjustment there. But they did it against a side that made 19 turnovers, 11 of them in the 22. I just don't think when it comes to finals footy, that's what you're going to see. So I still think that defence, I know they keep winning games, I just don't know how. Like, honestly, I'm like, how are you tackling at that percentage and not? But it's more about the opposition as well and forcing those areas.
Yeah, can they keep up with the forward power that we're seeing from the Hurricanes and the Blues as well? Because it's been quite impressive.
It is their strength though as well. Like they've got a lot of big bodies, and that's what they go to. They just go direct. It's not. All three of those sides are fairly similar. If anything, the Blues and Brumbies are most similar because they have similar amount of offloads. You know when they get in the 22. You know, we're so used to the Blues probably looking for a cross-field kick. They don't. Every forward just rolls up the sleeve. It doesn't even look like it's coming out of there. They eventually get over there. So the Brumbies and Blues are quite similar. Where the Canes differ is they will chance their arm. They may have a higher turnover rate, but man, this year they've shown a skill set, especially in their forward pack, that, you know, they're 15 backs really. So they can go through you, the Canes, and I think maybe they forgot that for a bit. They were probably going out the back a little bit too soon, and it was a little bit messy out there through that line speed pressure. I think they'll learn from this game that, man, we're just going to have to keep going through teams that will eventually open up those tips and inside balls and bombs.
Bryn?
Yeah, I think the physicality, we've talked about it for a lot, not just at Super Rugby level, but international level. If the Hurricanes can get that right, which I think they will, they'll know what's coming with the Brumbies, that they had that experience in Canberra. It'll be something that I guess the Hurricanes will look forward to the next time if they do get that opportunity.
The physicality has been something that we've talked a fair bit about in international rugby, and you know, there's been a lot of chat about whether or not New Zealand teams are at a loss without South African teams to challenge them physically. And we've actually got a question that's come through from one of our people. Of course, send us an email at aotearoarugbypod@sky.co.nz, or you can get a comment on the YouTube comments section. We're always scouring those for whatever colourful things come through. And we've had one this week from a Kiwi called Andrew Wiseman, who actually lives in South Africa. So he's interested in this perspective about whether or not that is the case. And he says, do you think the New Zealand teams are missing the physicality of the SA teams in Super Rugby? How might this impact our ability to adapt our game? In my opinion, I see the physicality of the Blues and the Hurricanes alongside the pace and flair of Super Rugby, and this actually puts us in a better place on the global stage. Do you agree with what he's trying to say there? Yeah,
I think that, you know, not only players but coaches have realised, you know, the game is changing, and if you look at even the stats, like the gain line stats, the thing that sort of blow my mind is both the Hurricanes and the Blues had 60% gain line. Previously, we've been impressed at 40, 45, you know, and defence always wins. You know, it always feels like, but it does feel like, I suppose with the new laws and, you know, the unwillingness to give away penalties, the attack is starting to sort of overturn that rush defence, and a lot of that comes down to the lack of, I suppose, pushing of the boundaries. And I think Vern Cotter's been massive for the Blues in the sense that he's like, you are the biggest man in this competition. You need to just go straight through people and back yourself to do so. So I think his experience and knowledge from the Northern Hemisphere has actually benefited the Blues. But the beauty of that is that will then be taken, you know, coaches watch, understand it, and naturally teams will adjust. So I think we're doing a much better job, but I also think the IP of someone like Vern Cotter has probably sped up that change, in my opinion, a little bit quicker.
With that, Bryn, extending that, do you think that if that becomes the norm, that certainly the All Blacks will be in a better position from here on out?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think we talked at length probably around the contact area and winning the breakdown. We even had the All Black boys coming on and talking around in Ireland or South Africa and what that in turn has looked like with how the game's been played in the Northern Hemisphere. So I think the Blues have been awesome in and around that. The Canes as well. The Chiefs, I think, for a long period of time have been able to take players past the ball and doing that consistently. So I think probably one area where the Crusaders have struggled this year has been around that gain line contact and been able to win collisions consistently. And I think the body height and being able to get that right consistently, and your cleaners being able to get past the ball. You know, I even saw it in the under-20s game. I actually watched a bit of that against the Australians, and you're just looking at, you know, the 1 to 3 jerseys in that game. just going straight past the ball, because in turn, that's how you can play on top of teams. You get quick ball and you'll be able to play on your own terms, and the defense isn't dictating of where you want to be. So I think it's an improvement that I've seen in the last probably 12 to 18 months. And I think the All Blacks, and I think this year, especially in the breakdown area with some teams, they've been crucial and I guess relentless in and around winning that breakdown area. I think the Blues have been the best at that. It's not just in terms of what they're doing in their forward pods off 9. They're going through teams, pick and goes. They're not afraid to do it for long periods of phases. And then I guess in turn with the if you look on the Hurricanes on the weekend, they weren't able to adapt, and taking that pillar was getting offside a few times, and the Blues were just harping in that and going at that consistently. So to answer your question, I think it's been a lot better, and I think we haven't had the South African teams with their physicality. It's still something that we're going to have to come to terms with, and I guess when we do play them, to try and expect something different that we don't play against that type of teams. But I think it's been a lot better this year, especially in Super Rugby Pacific.
I think you need both, though. I think the Hurricanes probably have shown it the best this year of having the ability to go through and have that interplay of ball play. And I think you use Ireland as an example. I know they didn't get past the quarter-final, but through a long period of time, they won a hell of a lot of test matches, and a lot of theirs was making good decisions around their forward pod and having the skill set to run the tips, the inside balls or the balls out the back, and have the ability to go through teams. So I still think the New Zealand DNA is both, but early on in fixtures, I think we know, especially international rugby, don't overcomplicate it. Just build phases and try and win that arm wrestle to tire teams out, to then take advantage of that.
Cool. Now, we've got this Player Sports Ball here for you, Andrew, for your question of the week. Send in your questions to Aotearoa Rugby Pod at sky.co.nz or get into the YouTube comments section. Send us a question. You're in the draw to win this ball each week. So thank you very much, Andrew, for that. Let's carry on with the international footy then while we're talking it, because World Rugby has gone and changed a bunch of things this week. Last week we were talking about what could change. This week they did change them. So we've seen a change in the law, obviously the DuPont law about players retreating, going forward and backwards when a kick is made and when they get put on side. So there's been a change there, so you can't advance at all if you're in front of the kicker. So that's one. Then there's the free kick law, which is to scrutinise what the Springboks did because of the DuPont law and take the scrum. So there's lots of things going on here to try to make this game simple or not simple. The free kick law, I think, is one of the most interesting, not taking the scrum. The DuPont law, we knew that was coming. When when Damien Willemse took it, I think we all celebrated the fact that it was clever knowledge of the law. Now that this whole kicking situation is unlikely to happen with the new kicking law, was there a good reason to take away the ability to use a scrum?
No, because I still think it's a high-risk play to take the scrum. And if especially if the other rule of not being able to reset if there's a free kick is probably not as damning. But if you've got a dominant scrum, I don't see why having the courage to do it in your 22, because, man, you could slip, it could be a penalty to the opposition. There is a lot of risk for the team that does that, so you've got to have a lot of belief in it. And also probably isn't being used that much, and I don't know how much more it would be, as you say, once the DuPont law was sorted. But I have no doubt it's very much spiced things up in South Africa.
Well, there was a fair bit of reaction, Bryn, in the comments section about our chat about that particular episode and whether it was a good thing or a bad thing to rugby. In my opinion, I'd like to see something interesting happen, but there was a lot of chat there. I suppose a scrum, though, in the modern game is also a wonderful way of attacking. It's a great base to attack from. So to bring this law in the name of increasing attacking opportunities might not necessarily be a true reflection of what could happen if you still left it there?
Yeah, I think so. I'm probably here with Jip as well. I think, having a dominant forward pack it's really a weapon. Whenever you do get a free kick, you reset and you're able to build momentum off that. And I know that obviously the South Africans comment section will be roaring after this one, hearing this new rule change. But yeah, and I think it's, very sometimes in games you actually don't have a lot of scrums in the scrum attack that you see with some teams. You look at the Hurricanes this year and their ability to be able to strike off line-out strikes or even scrum strikes as well, getting that opportunity to do that, whether that's off a free kick or it comes off a penalty because you have a dominant scrum. So, yeah, interesting for that rule. I think the reason why it was brought in, you touched on it, was the DuPont law and being able to not put a scrum in that kind of position when you're in that kick battle. So, yeah, I think it's pretty tough. Considering you look at the South Africans, they know that it's a massive weapon for them, whether it's their starting front forward pack or the guys that are coming on that are referred to the bomb squad.
And another one that I thought was really interesting, Jip, was the ability to take a mark in your own 22 will be trialled later on in the year in some competitions. A mark off the kickoff in your own 22.
Yeah.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, it is.
They're saying compete for the ball, essentially. They want to be competition for the ball and short kickoffs.
Yeah, and, looking to sort of get the ball back. We do see that a lot, though. I mean, if we use the Blues game the weekend, Caleb Clark got up. We've been seeing it with Kieran Reid for a number of years when he was playing those short kickoffs, and a lot of sides do try to get the ball back. Where it will be interesting is when the game's on the line and you want to put territorial pressure on the opposition, how that sort of looks and how creative players get, potentially looking to just keep it low and rolling, and I'm sure they'll practice it so that when that moment comes they can do so. So I think it brings a bit of interest. Will it be a big change? Like, if they take a mark, they can't go for a scrum, so they're only really going to kick it out or tap it. So I'm not sure how impactful it will be.
Bryn, do you see a world where it's of any use taking a mark off a kickoff?
I don't really like it, to be honest, because I did watch it in I think the under-20s, they had that law. And I think, we want to be able to try and keep the ball in play. And in turn, if you do get it wrong and you're able to call a mark, whoever is in that position, you're pretty much going to end up kicking it out anyway. So, do we want to, give it another opportunity where there is a kicking element in it? I think we can use it in better spaces like we've done with 50-22s and been able to kick in those kind of attacking ways. I just think that there, I struggle. I struggle with the benefit of how we can try and speeding up the game and make it more attacking, I guess, a better product when you have that kind of law putting in.
Before we get through to our tipping competition, let's just touch quickly on the Black Ferns. 57-5 against the USA in their opening game of the Pac-4. Obviously a pretty easy walkover there for the Black Ferns as they get ready for the WXV later in the year, where the real competition is going to come from France and England, and they looked to go against USA, Australia and Canada and really make an impression. Canada beat Australia relatively easily as well. Some interesting points from the game, though. The Black Ferns, first and foremost, hit the ground running. They looked really good in that first 26 minutes, and then...
They'll be frustrated with the other remaining minutes, but I think it was 15 minutes, it was 36-0 or something. But, this USA team drew with the Chiefs Manawa development the week before. And I watched that game, so they're not the sternest test. And, one of the frustrations of the Black Ferns coaching group throughout Opiki was the high turnover rate and the ability to not put teams away. So I'm sure that is no doubt a focus, and also a key focus will be how they make their substitutions at a time that sort of fosters that momentum to remain versus maybe just making it a little bit clunky and then the turnovers increasing and not allowing them to, because they sort of came back into it towards the end again. There was just that blip of sort of 20-30 minutes where it was a little bit clunky.
They had one handling error in the first half and 2 penalties conceded, which were probably trends that we would see a lot in Aupiki, whether it was any team playing a high skill error rate or penalties that were against some other teams. So I think that's one thing that they would be pleased around. I thought their breakdown, their skill set and around their getting the ball to the edge and giving Vahakolo, Mirirangi Paul, obviously some really good opportunities to score some tries with Rugby too as well. So they'll be pleased, but I think at the same time knowing there's going to be some sterner tests, and it's been able to, I guess, get the big rocks of what you wanted to achieve, which you'd have to think would be the execution of their skill set, their set piece parity. But I think also I really enjoyed their kicking game. Maya Joseph had some really good attacking kicks and some long kicks off their exits. Even I thought Demont was obviously trying to find some space off set piece really, really quick. So Mirirangi Paul, Ruby too, even Vahakola was trying to kick on the edge. So I think there is a willingness to be able to try and kick that ball, knowing when you are going to play in England, you're not going to be able to run it from your own half, which they have shown, which they did last year. So hopefully we can see an improved performance, and whether they want to change the squad or not, I'm not too sure. But there's some pleasing trends, I think, that I saw in them games that will hopefully set them up what's to come in the future.
When you look at the forward pack, I think we saw Leila Say probably have her best game in a black jersey. She was obviously superb for the Poa, getting that go forward all year. When you combine her with Michaele Tu'u and Kennedy Simon, that is a very, very powerful loose forward trio. Is that the team that needs to play against England in the loosies?
Yeah, I think so. Like, what impressed me the most about Sa'i was, man, she got so dominant in the collisions, but then she'd never risked a 50-50. Like, she just kept going, driving her legs, set the ruck, got that quick ball. So often it would be easy for someone as dominant as her in the collisions to just look for that little offload, that little, big sort of play that highlights the individual and everyone talks about. I was just so impressed time and time again. She just took that ball to ground. She didn't overdrive her play either. Like, she didn't keep fighting and give the USA team time to set defensively. She knew when to go down and get that ball, make sure it's quick. Some of her carries, there was no cleaners. It was just ball was placed, gone.
Yeah.
It was a big statement game from her, I believe, and definitely that is the loose forward trio if you were going to pick it against England tomorrow.
I think collectively, them as a unit, Simon and obviously Michaele Tu'u, who I think is a workhorse in and around there. But I think with what Kaipo Olsen Baker did coming off the bench as well, I think it's going to be really important if you're going to have play an English team that are very physical around that breakdown. It's been able to just bring the equivalent of a bomb squad of someone who has that same good go forward carry, is good in around that breakdown area. And I thought she came on and had a massive impact in and around those areas. So the four of them, obviously, I'm not too sure who else. You've obviously got Lucy Jenkins is there as well, who is in that group. But those four, I think, moving forward, will be massive in and around that loose forward trio against an English side.
Okay, let's move on to our Super Rugby tipping competition, tipping.super.rugby, the Aotearoa Rugby Pod League. It's been a bit of movement this week. Big Boys has jumped to the top in the competition. We've made a little bit of movement too, which has been along the way. But if you win this competition, you can come on the show off the back of Super Rugby and tell us all about what you think about what's going on in the world of rugby. So that's the reason to come and join. Now, the Canes versus Moana Pacifica is the first choice here. And I'd imagine that is a one-way choice.
Yeah, and I'd say you'll get a few guys that are getting an opportunity to put their hand up. A few guys will obviously get rested, and that always comes with intrigue. And I think when we've previously seen it against the Rebels, when the Canes gave opportunity, and against the Drua, man, this next tier have really stood up. So I think that normal service will resume when they get their opportunity and they'll dominate. Yeah.
By how much, Brett?
Yeah, that's the question. I think, we showed against the Rebels last time when they made those changes. There's a lot of points scored and it didn't really change in terms of the result of how many points they won by. So I see it being pretty similar, and hopefully I get one tip right, because I think I don't see a lot when I was reading my emails. I had a bit of blue vision, so I can probably make the right pick. So yeah, I'll go the Hurricanes to get this one over the line.
And they will need those bonus points, the Hurricanes, because if the Brumbies get bonus points, that second or first spot could really be decided by that going down the run. So, the Rebels v the Chiefs. Chiefs, that easy?
Yep.
Rebels at home.
Yep. I respect the Rebels and respect them a hell of a lot more than I have probably previous years, especially at home. I don't know, the Chiefs just... There's something about them, I don't know. They make me nervous as a Blues fan. They seem to be flying high, and I think Anton Leonard-Brown, Quinta Paia, those sorts of big name players are really starting to find their mojo.
And Britain, the Chiefs need this win, because after that they've got the Canes and the Blues. So this is probably the only win which most people would think is guaranteed for them through the rest of the competition.
Yeah, I just think with what's on the line and knowing where they want to finish in the competition, and obviously with a few derbies with other teams in that top, they could slip up. So yeah, they'll be probably wanting a bonus point. I know the Rebels have been really good this year, and especially at home, but you'd have to think this is one they're eyeing up around getting a bonus point to then give themselves a chance to possibly sneak to that second or third, stay in that third position.
Bren, this next one is a difficult one, and the reason I say it's a difficult one is because it's a Drua versus the Reds in Fiji. The Drua fell apart against the Force. I don't know if anyone saw it quite coming in that way, away from home, and the Reds are looking pretty strong. The Reds also understand what it's like to play in hot, muggy conditions.
They do, and I think that's a big part of it. I think, being in those conditions and I guess understanding what is going to be coming is going to be coming. We'll give them a chance. But I think you just have to think Mick Byrne, knowing being in Fiji and with what's on the line, if they get a win there, it gets pretty close to cementing themselves that number 8 spot with the Force and probably the Force, the Crusaders and the Waratahs trying to chase them. So I'd love for the Drua to lose, obviously for being a Crusaders fan, but I think they'll be too much in Fiji and get the job done.
I'm saying that the Drua are a different team at home. I just did not see that performance against the Force coming, so it's dipped my confidence a little bit. I will probably go Reds.
Yeah. If the Chiefs were to go down to both the Canes and the Blues, the Reds have an opportunity to force themselves into the top 4 and get a home playoff game. So there is a lot on the line for them. They should be dialed in.
Yeah, and a massive opportunity. If you can win in Fiji, man, that's a big tip of the cap, and that's sort of finals footing mindset. So it's an important week for them.
The Brumbies versus the Crusaders. What do you think?
Brian?
I'm going to actually take a line out. I'm going to take a line out of Jipper, and I'm going to need to see the squad.
Oh, no.
Nah, you can't do that.
Because I think
You know exactly what the squads are going to be.
If a Cody Taylor and a Scott Barrett and an Ethan Blackadder are in and around that forward pack, I think they get the job done.
They get the job
I
done
think just with what
in Canberra.
they get the job done. They get the job done in Canberra because the Achilles heel, I believe, has been in and around the forward pack, even though I thought there were a lot more moments on the weekend that I thought they were a lot better. But I think if they have that kind of caliber player, all of them back, I think they get the job done. I think they get the job done. There could be a possibility with the Fergus Burke maybe coming back as well, which could help in and around that game management-wise. And Noah Hotham played really well with Drummy, obviously, there with the experience. And David Havili moving back to 12 if that does end up happening. There's a lot of things that have to play out with that, obviously. But the forward pack, if those 3 guys are there, I think they get the job done. So I'm going to have to wait and see what the list is.
Yes, on the line. I like it. I like it.
I do feel like when you saw Tanielu Talea's try come off the head of Broughton and it pops up and he runs 60 metres, I just thought, man, this year just is not, it's just not going their way. Like, that's very unfortunate. And then, obviously, the difference was Cam Miller's boot. The Crusaders actually scored more tries than the Highlanders, but their discipline let them down. As I said before with the Brumbies, if you have ill discipline, they will go into that 22 and they will score, probably 8 times out of 10. So that'll be crucial for them. They'll know that. I thought it was their best performance in a long time, though. They probably should have won that game. But as I said, their discipline and Cam Miller, to be honest, he's had some big performances of late and led the Highlanders to a good victory. I just probably go to Brumbies at home.
Yeah.
It's another one. I need my points.
Yeah, look.
The logical.
It's when you look at what's happened this year, it's pretty difficult to think that it's going to be anything other than the Brumbies, surely. For me, like, the Crusaders have won 2 games. Right, okay, well, they need that win because it's going to be very difficult if the Drua are going to pick up 1 win. It could even knock the Crusaders completely out of contention. So they need to start doing it this week if they've got any shot at all of making it. The Blues against the Highlanders in Auckland, Jibber.
Yeah, I'll go the Blues.
Bryn?
Yeah, I'm going to back the Blues, but I think sometimes, Jip, you'll know, when you have such a big game emotionally and what's required and knowing that it's a 1v2 battle, the next week is always sometimes tougher to get up for, knowing what's required mentally. So I'm going to back the Blues, but I wouldn't be surprised. Sorry, I'm interested to see how they can go, if they can back up performance of the high emotion of winning a game like that to then be as ruthless and clinical as they have shown. So I'll go the Blues, but I'm just going to be interested to see how that plays out against the Highlanders this week.
Force versus the Waratahs to close out.
God, the Force is really, they confuse me.
So do the Waratahs.
Yeah. I'm going to go the Waratahs.
You're going to go the Waratahs?
Yeah, that's purely based on stats.
Right, what stats?
Their defence, so they're tackling at a high percentage. Yes, the Force are physical, but I do feel like 19 turnovers and 93% D, if they can keep the D and limit the turnovers because they had a lot of ball, they just should win. Like, if you look man for man, they should win that game. So I'm just going based on common sense player for player,
Yeah.
they should win that
Do
game.
not underestimate the Waratahs' ability to disappoint.
Yep. Well, I did. It probably would have helped me because remember my prediction?
Yeah.
So they were going to be last. So
Yeah.
if the Force get up.
Yeah.
I'm going the Waratahs for my heart. Then that gives the Crusaders a chance to make the top 8. So no analyst work here, just going through my heart here and hoping the Waratahs get through and give the Crusaders a chance to make the quarters.
Everyone at the bottom loses, the Crusaders win, and Bryn Hall is happy.
For another week.
For another week.
They get the job done, and they get the job done in Canberra, which is going to be a very hard task. Still gives me hope, mate.
Well, we look forward to that next week when you get to say, I told you so.
Well, I'll be in studio, so I'll be able to tell you in person. Yeah, we'll be back, mate. Looking forward to seeing Jipper's legs there. It's good to see the shorts are back, Jip.
Bryn.
And tighter than ever. The more he squats, the tighter the pants get.
And that's us for a week. Thanks for coming. Great to have you here.